Up next on Wave Design, a summer trip to 1999 with pool renders, Mac computers, and a deep dive into Infinity coming up next. So the sun is out, summer is at its peak, and Wave Design has been busy rendering virtual swimming pools, because actual public pools are kind of gross. Computer-generated pools, though, now those would be fun to swim in. So many of these early CGI pool renders seem like they existed mostly to flex 90s ray-tracing water effects, posted through various Amiga groups and shareware CD-ROMs. Well, today we're going to try and one-up these pool renders, creating the ultimate ray-traced pool in a Macintosh program called Infini-D, an infinity pool, if you will. The Infini-D program actually goes back to the early 1990s as one of the first 3D programs targeting desktop publishers and designers. The early versions of Infini-D were rather slow and limited, but as the Macintosh evolved from 68K desktops to early PowerPC to the G3, Infini-D advanced right alongside it and picked up a number of features. Of course, we've got to have an appropriate Macintosh to run this on. By 1999, Apple was well past beige and into its transparent plastic era, even in their professional product line. The beige Power Macintosh that had been standard for years was out. In its place was Apple's very professional, fully upgraded G3 Tower in Blueberry. Yeah, it really does look like it belongs poolside more than in an office, with its transparent plastic and gorgeous blue color styling. And of course, if we boot the G3, we've got classic macOS 9 with the Steve Jobs approved Blueberry wallpaper and the pre-OS X Platinum interface. Now, taking a look at Infinity, we've got a pretty standard 3D layout. We've got 4 camera views, camera, right, front, and top, and we've got panels on the side for shaders, textures, and different layers. At the top, we have our navigation panel to transform objects and rotate the camera, and we have a couple of starter shapes that we can get started with. But what if we want to import something a little bit more complicated than just basic geometric shapes, such as a pool scene that we already modeled in Blender before we realized we could use superior 90s software? Well, if we go into Infinity, we do have the option to import objects, but the only file types available are 3DMF, which was an obsolete QuickTime format Apple promoted in the 1990s, or DXF, which is a more universal CAD format. In fact, if we go to our Blender preferences, it comes out of the box with a DXF import and export plugin, usually turned on by default in older versions of Blender. So we could go up to File, Export, and just export our scene like this. But this would create a problem, because Infinity would import it as a singular object without any way to control materials or texturing. Instead, we want to go ahead and select all of our objects, and then with the F3 menu, convert it to a mesh. And this will convert some of our curved shapes like the pool edge into polygons so that we don't have to worry about that. and then select them all again and join them together. And this might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but we'll apply the transforms so that everything starts at the origin, and then we'll select everything, hit P, and separate it by material. This way we can export each material as its own DXF object and import it into Infini-D. Now there are probably ways to script this a little bit better so that you don't have to do it one by one, but you can do this out of the box with just regular Blender. And back in Infini-D, we've copied our DXF objects over, so we can go to our folder that we put them in, and just hit DXF and start importing. We can adjust the smoothing angle, turn off scale and center because we already applied our transforms, and then once again import these objects one by one. But you'll see they come in at the correct position and the correct scale, so that this is basically recreating our Blender scene. And once that's done, we can move our camera into position, and turn on our Phong rendering to see what this looks like. Pretty cool, but no shaders or materials yet. We'll start applying those next when we come back. So we already looked at our preset materials panel that has different materials like glass and brick, and some plastic textures we can immediately start applying to our umbrellas. And for our pool water, we'll go ahead and use the water ripple preset as a base. You'll notice that when it comes in, it looks more like an oil spill. That's because we need to go up to the edit menu and set our environment map. And this is the very 1990s way of handling reflections, essentially just applying a texture as the reflective layer. But you can see already what kind of a difference this makes when we apply it. Our pool water now looks like actual pool water. And of course we're not limited to just these presets as is. We can go in and edit properties like the diffuse shading, tone down some of our reflectiveness, and make it look a little bit more accurate when we turn on reflections. And we're not just limited to basic materials. We can also do textures and something that Infini-D calls composed surfaces. And this is actually one of the more advanced features that the program offers. It's a complete multi-material layer editor where you can combine materials and textures together. So if we want to add a floor texture to our pool, we can load an image, and we'll pick out a checker pattern that we created in Photoshop. We can set that to tile infinitely, and Infini-D doesn't have a full UV texture editor, but we can choose from several different projection modes for textures, such as spherical, cubical, or just a straight projection, and we can adjust the size of the texture in the editor. And just with that simple texture change, our scene already looks a lot better. We can add photo textures as well if we load another image. We can go to our texture library, and these are textures from the Marlin General Purpose Surfaces CD, stored as JPEG, but we can convert them to PIC for Infini-D. We'll pick out a nice marble pattern, and then make that a cubical projection, add a little bit of bump mapping, and we can't forget to make it tileable. And there's our nice pool edge. And now we'll finish applying our materials. So we'll see what this looks like in a preview render, and it's looking pretty good so far with these textures and materials. One thing you'll notice is that it's a little bit flat with no actual shading to it. So when we come back, we'll apply shading and our finishing touches to this Infini-D pool scene, coming up next. So by default in Infini-D, we have two lights already set up in our scene, an ambient light and a distant light that's essentially a directional light or sun in the scene. You can see if we manipulate the distant light in the gizmo that our entire scene lighting changes. Of course, we can also add our own point lights and spotlights. So if we wanted a light shining through the tree, we can drag a spotlight here. And we have a lot of different properties that we can edit on spotlights. Things such as the cone angle and the fall off for the light. So we'll make that a little bit wider. And then we'll also turn on sharp shadows, so that we can see the actual shadows of the leaves on the ground and hitting the beach umbrella. So that's a really cool effect. Another neat effect we can do in Infini-D, if we want to cast a shadow but don't have a physical object in the scene to cast it, we can actually fake that shadow. We can turn on sharp shadows, and then we have a theatrical menu at the bottom to add either a gel or a mask. And you can think of a mask kind of, if this was a physical stage light, this would be the cutout that goes in front of it to project different shadows and shapes into the scene. And this is a cool effect, not something that you see even on some of the higher end programs at the time. So now for finishing touches, we'll add some shapes that we created in Infini-D itself to give this more of a 90s Trapper Keeper vibe. We'll change the background to this sphere that's been turned inside out to create a weird reflection pattern. And that looks really cool, so it's time to render, coming up next. So when we go into the render menu, we have several quality options we can set. Of course, the highest end rendering mode is Raytracing, but we also have options for Phong, Garage, or flat shading, depending on our computer and requirements. Also have options for anti-aliasing, transparency and reflections, and we can render to a resolution up to 4000 by 4000, so pretty high res for the time. But when we go to render this, we run into a big problem with all those fancy effects. This was way too much for a single Power Macintosh G3 to handle, and 10 hours is generous. The actual render time might be closer to 16 to 24 hours, just for a single frame. So what do we do with this? The most obvious solution might be to simply upgrade the processor in this Power Macintosh, one of those fancy Sonnet upgrade cards. But there's a practical ceiling to how fast those PowerPC cards went, and it doesn't really solve the issue that Infini-D can only render one tile at a time. Or can it? We can cheat a little bit and take advantage of Infini-D's network rendering capabilities, a feature that was almost a requirement in the 90s to do any serious rendering. In fact, Included network rendering was one of the major selling points of Infinity to Macintosh-equipped offices. So we're going to use not one or two, but 5 Mac Mini G4s networked together to complete this render. And why a G4 Mini? Well, it turns out that what was $500 budget hardware in 2005 is actually the perfect hardware combination for OS 9 applications. And we can unofficially install OS 9 with the modified ROM and the Infini-D network controls to create the perfect compact render node, and repeat this for each new Mini that we add to the system. And it's off we go once that's all set up, because Infinity will automatically detect the Minis on the network and add them to the render job. It's the perfect little setup for 90s rendering. And if you're wondering how the pool itself turned out after we added 5 Mac Minis to the mix, take a look. Sorry to everyone making pools in 1991, because we really went a little bit overboard with the ray tracing on this, but it's all in good summer spirit. So in the end, we had a little bit of help for our supposed 1999 render, but that's okay. This kind of scalability in a Mac program is so cool to demonstrate, and it's fun to think that it's almost infinitely scalable. So that's all for this month. The pool vibes are done, and it's time to get back to work editing vintage computer festival footage for a special presentation coming soon next month. We'll see you then.